My name is Philippe, and my life changed in ways I never imagined possible when a young man named Driss walked through my door one ordinary morning in Paris. I had been living in my luxurious mansion for years after an incident that left me unable to move from the neck down, requiring assistance for every single aspect of my daily existence. My assistant Magali and I spent countless hours interviewing candidates for the position of live-in caregiver, but each person who sat before me offered the same thing: pity wrapped in professional courtesy, sympathy disguised as compassion, and that look in their eyes that made me feel less than human. I had grown accustomed to this routine until the morning Driss arrived, and from the first moment I realized he was different from everyone else who had come seeking employment in my home. Driss had no intention of actually securing the position when he showed up for his interview that day. He needed a signature on a rejection letter to continue receiving welfare benefits, nothing more, and his casualness during our meeting was almost shocking in its honesty. He flirted shamelessly with Magali, showed no particular interest in the job requirements, and treated the entire situation as an inconvenient formality. When I told him to return the following morning to collect his signed document, I watched him leave without any expectation of what would unfold next. That night I thought about all the qualified, overly eager candidates I had seen, and something about Driss's complete lack of pretense stayed with me in a way I couldn't quite explain. The next morning, when Driss returned expecting his rejection letter, my aide Yvonne greeted him with surprising news. He had the job on a trial basis. I could see the confusion and even alarm on his face as he realized what this meant, but I had made my decision for reasons that went beyond conventional qualifications. As the days began to unfold, Driss learned the full extent of my condition and what his responsibilities would entail, accompanying me through every moment of my daily routine and discovering a lifestyle completely foreign to his own experiences. He came from a small apartment in the suburbs that he shared with his extended family, and the contrast between his world and mine could not have been more dramatic. His aunt had been furious with him for disappearing for 6 months, and he faced her anger when he returned home that first evening. Despite his complete lack of experience and initial reluctance, Driss proved remarkably capable at his duties, though his methods were unconventional to say the least. One of my longtime friends discovered Driss had spent 6 months in prison for robbery and warned me about my new employee's criminal background, but I dismissed these concerns immediately. I explained that Driss was the only person who treated me as an equal, rather than an object of pity, and as long as he performed his job properly, his past meant nothing to me. This quality, this refusal to see me as broken or fragile, became the foundation of something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine friendship. Over time, as Driss took care of me through my frequent episodes of phantom discomfort, we grew closer, and I found myself opening up about parts of my life I rarely discussed with anyone. I told Driss about the paragliding incident that had changed everything, how one moment of flying free had resulted in this permanent state of immobility. I also shared the painful truth that my wife had passed away without us having children together, a loss that still weighed heavily on my heart years later. Gradually, with Driss's encouragement, I began addressing aspects of my personal life I had been neglecting, including being more firm with my adopted daughter Elisa, who had developed habits of treating the household staff poorly. Driss discovered the world of fine art during this time, both classical and contemporary pieces, and he even began painting himself, finding an outlet for expression he never knew he possessed. For my birthday, I arranged for a private classical music concert to be performed in my living room, and I watched as Driss initially resisted, but then opened himself to the experience when I guided him through listening more carefully. Then Driss shared his own musical preferences with everyone present, playing Earth, Wind and Fire's Boogie Wonderland, and suddenly the entire atmosphere transformed as my guests began dancing and enjoying themselves in ways they hadn't in years. These moments showed me how Driss was bringing life back into my carefully controlled existence, breaking down walls I hadn't even realized I had constructed around myself. One day Driss discovered I had been corresponding with a woman named Eleanor, who lived in Dunkirk, maintaining a relationship purely through written letters. He immediately encouraged me to meet her in person, but I resisted out of fear about how she would react when she saw my condition. Driss persisted, eventually convincing me to speak with Eleanor by telephone, and we agreed I would send her a photograph of myself in my wheelchair so she would understand my situation. However, when the moment came, I couldn't bring myself to send that image, and instead I asked Yvonne to send a picture from before the incident, showing me as I had been when I could still walk and move freely. Eleanor agreed to meet me for a date, but when the appointed time arrived, fear overwhelmed me completely. I left with Yvonne before Eleanor could arrive, unable to face the possibility of seeing disappointment or discomfort in her eyes when she encountered the reality of who I had become. Trying to lift my spirits, I called Driss and invited him to join me for a paragliding weekend in the Alps, traveling in my private jet to revisit the activity that had once brought me such joy. During this trip, I gave Driss an envelope containing 11,000 euros, money I had received from selling one of his paintings to a friend by presenting him as an up-and-coming artist. Everything changed when Driss's young cousin Adama arrived at the mansion seeking refuge from trouble with a local group. Listening to Driss talk about his family, I learned he had been orphaned in Senegal and adopted by his aunt and uncle who brought him to France. After his uncle passed away and his aunt had more children, Driss found himself helping to support an ever-growing family. Recognizing his need to be there for them, I released Driss from his position, suggesting he might not want to spend his entire life assisting someone like me when he had his own path to forge. After Driss left, I hired several new caregivers to replace him, but none of them could fill the void his absence created. My spirits sank lower than they had been in years, and I stopped maintaining my appearance or taking care of myself properly. I grew a beard and neglected the routines that had once seemed so important, falling into a depression that worried everyone around me. Yvonne eventually contacted Driss out of concern for my deteriorating state, and when he arrived, he immediately took action in his characteristic direct manner. Driss drove me in my Maserati at high speeds through the Paris streets that night, and when police officers chased us down, he claimed I needed urgent medical attention. I pretended to have a medical episode, and the concerned officers escorted us to a hospital, but once they left us there, Driss drove away and took me straight to the seaside instead. He helped me shave and dress in elegant clothes, preparing me for something I didn't yet understand. We arrived at a restaurant in Cabourg, with a magnificent view of the ocean, and as we sat at our table, Driss suddenly stood up, wished me luck on my date, and walked away. Confusion filled me until moments later, when Eleanor walked through the restaurant door. The emotional impact of seeing her in person, knowing Driss had arranged this meeting without telling me, overwhelmed me completely. I looked through the window and saw Driss standing outside, smiling at me with that expression of friendship and encouragement that had transformed my life. He waved farewell and walked away, leaving me to begin this new chapter with Eleanor as we talked and discovered each other beyond the letters we had shared. In that moment, sitting across from her as the ocean stretched endlessly before us, I understood that Driss had given me something far more valuable than assistance with my daily needs. He had reminded me that my life still held possibilities I had thought were lost forever, and that being unable to move my body didn't mean I couldn't still experience connection, joy, and perhaps even love in ways I had stopped believing were possible for someone in my situation.